Hey guys, Peter Cap here. I'm back with another episode of Peter's No Cap History, the show where I combine my loves of fantasy and history to provide potential points of inspiration for aspiring fantasy artists, writers, and world builders. Today we are going back once again to Italy. Now, I've said before that I am Italian, but I don't think I ever told you guys specifically where in Italy my family comes from. I am 3/4 Sicilian, 1/4 Neapolitan, which, depending on what period in history we're talking about, technically mean I'd be completely Sicilian. And I'll explain what I mean by that later. Sicily is such a small island, and yet it has such a huge impact. Look where it's positioned, okay? We obviously have Italy right here. We have North Africa here, and then Greece is not too far away to its east, and southern France and Spain are to its west. All these areas have, one way or another, for one reason or another, fought over this island. Sicily, at several different points in its history, was a clusterfuck. So I just want to briefly go over more or less the entire history of Sicily, just to kind of really illustrate that, and then we're going to talk a little bit on why this probably happened so much. So let's start with antiquity. For centuries, Sicily was not ruled by any one power. Not only did you have a bunch of local tribes, because again, a lot of parts of history had tribes before they had anything else. The westernmost parts of Sicily were taken over by the Carthaginians, which are basically a successor civilization to the Phoenicians. If you heard of Hannibal Barca, it's that civilization. And the eastern parts of Sicily were colonized by the Greeks, as well as parts of southern Italy as well. I feel like it was prudent to mention that because a lot of stuff with southern Italy and Sicily kind of go hand in hand. Most notably the city of Syracuse, which was a very prominent city-state for centuries. So you had many wars between all these players on this island. Syracuse particularly warred a lot with Carthage, it would seem, that at one point they even took the fight to North Africa. Syracuse was also involved in the Peloponnesian War between the Athenians and the Spartans, and Athens actually invaded Sicily, and it took the intervention of the Spartans to prevent Athens from conquering Sicily. By the way, this is actually going to lead to a running theme where you're going to notice I'm going to keep talking about other nations and other groups of peoples when I'm supposed to be talking about Sicily. It's just part of the madness with this, just kind of like taken in stride, okay? Then the Romans came, and initially their holdings in Sicily were in the north here, and eventually they would take the whole island. The Romans were the first civilization to conquer all of Sicily. And this became very useful for them. It gave them a lot more control over stuff in the Mediterranean, as well as being able to strike at their enemy, Carthage. So as a result, the Romans held on to Sicily for centuries, up until the decline of the Russian Roman Empire, where this was one of many territories that was lost to the Vandals, who I mentioned in another video. What ended up being a reversal, the Vandals used Sicily as a springboard for them to raid around Italy itself. The Vandals would lose the island of Sicily to Odovaker, who was the Germanic chieftain that basically struck the finishing blow against the Russian Romans, although that's up for debate. He viewed himself as continuing the West, and the Ostrogoths would eventually take it from Odovaker, the Ostrogoths being another Germanic tribe just like the Vandals. You see what I mean, where it's like I have to talk about a bunch of other things, even if it's in brief, when we're talking about the history of Sicily? Now, the Ostrogoths would be taken down by the Byzantines, which, remember, were the Eastern Romans, and they would hold on to Sicily until the Arab conquest a few centuries later. They took down the Sassanid Persians, and they took a lot of the Byzantine territories in North Africa and the Mediterranean, and Sicily was one of these casualties. Centuries later, it would be the Normans who would reconquer Sicily from the Muslims. Now, in case you're wondering who the Normans are, you might have heard of William the Conqueror. He basically conquered England from the Saxons. It's like the same group of people, just like a different group. These were all descendants of Vikings, mixed with the locals of France, which would be the Franks at this point in time. Despite Frank sounding like France, these were like an ancestor, not French people. Yet another group of people I've had to bring up in this video. So yeah, they conquered Sicily, and by this point, Sicily, as you might imagine, was quite the cultural melting pot. You know, again, because we're talking about stuff for centuries. That all has a ripple effect, that all kind of blends together. Now, the Normans created what was initially a county of Sicily, and then a kingdom of Sicily. And this would have major repercussions, because eventually the Normans would kind of lose these Sicilian holdings through marriage, which led to a even bigger clusterfuck than anything else I've mentioned so far. Because basically they married into the House of Haustetten, which is a German house who also ruled the Holy Roman Empire, which is a mess in its own right that could probably be its own video in a similar vein to this one. You had these German nobles who now had claims to Sicily. And the Holy Roman Emperors also clashed a lot with the popes. yes, the Pope is now involved in this story. Because again, like, the relationship between the Holy Roman Emperors and the Popes was very problematic. Sometimes they worked together, sometimes they didn't. It was basically a case of like two major power brokers, not getting along. And there were several different points when the Pope would excommunicate the Holy Roman Emperor. And again, they would often prop up someone else to try and take over who was more agreeable to what they wanted. And Sicily, like many places in Italy, effectively was caught in the crossfire. Again, this would vary and fluctuate a lot throughout the centuries. And basically, one of the many times when the Holy Roman Emperors were excommunicated, the Pope was trying to find someone else to take over Sicily, and he settled with the French. A French noble house who also had ties to the French kings would basically beat the current German monarch, I forgot his name. So now the French are involved in southern Italy and Sicily. But the thing is, the people of Sicily did not like the French. So they decided to do the same thing the Pope did and got help from someone else. In this case, the Crown of Aragon, which is a Spanish kingdom. So just to recap, in the past century or few decades, by this point we're talking about the 12 or 1300s, like we have Germany, France, and parts of Spain now involved with Sicily. You with me so far? And yeah, basically the Aragonese took over Sicily. It was called the Sicilian Vespers. And this is why I said that depending on the period, I would be full Sicilian, because for a few centuries, this area was known as the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, one being Sicily, one being southern Italy. But again, the French weren't done, okay? Because of their involvement in Naples, they had a territorial claim to southern Italy. This would spawn the Italian Wars, which is another mess that I need to do more research on, but again, another mess that involves the Holy Roman Emperor, Spain, France, and it's actually kind of insane the amount of people involved. And as a result of this, Sicily was one of many holdings by the Habsburgs, everyone's favorite inbred family. Yeah, basically the Spanish branch of the Habsburgs held territorial claim to Sicily. Like, moving forward, now it's like the time of Napoleon. Napoleon basically took down the two Sicilies during his conquest of Italy. When Napoleon was defeated, you had this Kingdom of Italy, that would last for a little while until World War I. Sicily at one point tried to break away from Italy. The Republic of Italy kind of brought them back in. That's basically the gist. Again, this is a very broad history. I do not claim to be a historian, so I'm sure I probably got some details wrong here. But as you can see, that is a lot to talk about for a small island in the Mediterranean. So let's talk about why on earth this happened. I think some of it's more of a case of one thing kind of leading to another, and it's not really anything too deeper than that. But I do think there is a little bit more to it, especially if you take into account stuff from ancient times. Sicily is in a great spot geographically. It provides a natural point of entry. People from Italy who want to strike at North Africa, or people from North Africa that want to strike at Italy, or it provides people from southern Europe like Greece or Spain. It gives them control over the Mediterranean in a very big way. It's a very useful piece of land to own. And even as late as World War II, this was a thing. Like, even before D-Day, the first instance of Allied troops landing in Europe, in Axis-occupied Europe, was in Sicily. The reason why this isn't talked about too much is they really weren't able to get much further than Italy by the time the war ended, which is why stuff like D-Day was a thing at all. I think another reason why Sicily, was fought over so much is, to be honest, it's like so many places in Italy, it is an absolutely gorgeous land. I know that might be borderline jingoistic of me to say, but it is. It is a beautiful land. Who wouldn't want to rule it? So how can you apply this to your own fantasy stories? Well, if you want a point of reference for how politics can be confusing. No, in all seriousness though, it is a good case study of how geography can lead to very interesting things. You know what I mean? Like, when you're designing your world, when you're designing your maps, if you want a good point of reference for how to make something like a natural point for conflict, having a piece of geography be very important so that everyone's fighting over it, I feel like Sicily is a good thing to take reference from for how to do it. So that is basically it. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I know this has probably been one of the least coherent episodes of Peter's No Cap history. I tried to make it as clear as possible, but something tells me I still failed this a bit. For now though, I will see you guys later.